You are sitting on a throne right now, and you don't even know it. Every single day you wake up with a finite reserve of something more valuable than money, more dangerous than ambition, more targeted than you realize, your energy. And what have you been doing with it? You've been handing it out like a weak ruler tossing coins to a crowd that will forget his name by sundown. Listen to me carefully. Machiavelli understood something that most people die without learning. Power is not about what you gain, it's about what you refuse to lose. And you have been losing, quietly, constantly. You've been losing it in conversations that go nowhere, in relationships that take everything and build nothing, in explanations you never owed to people who were never listening. You've been sitting on a throne, but you left the gates open, you dismissed the guards, and you invited every wanderer, every gossip, every smiling thief right into the center of your kingdom. And now you're tired, not physically, something deeper than that. You're tired in a place that sleep cannot reach. And that exhaustion is not because life is hard, it is because you have been ruling without walls. A king without boundaries is not generous, he is conquered. The territory of your mind, your time, your focus, your emotional depth. That is your kingdom. And right now, someone who does not deserve a single room in your palace is living in your head rent-free, eating your peace for breakfast and calling it friendship. That ends today, not tomorrow, not when you're ready, now. Because Machiavelli did not write for men who waited. He wrote for men who understood that the moment you recognize your power, the very next breath must be used to defend it. You are not here for motivation. You are here for a coronation. The bleeding you call generosity. Let me tell you something that will burn when you hear it, but you need to hear it more than you need comfort right now. That thing you've been calling kindness. That open-door policy you run with your time, your attention, your emotional bandwidth, that is not generosity. That is a wound you dressed up in noble language so you wouldn't have to admit you were bleeding. You gave and gave and gave, and you told yourself it made you a good person. But Machiavelli would have looked at you and seen something very different. He would have seen a ruler funding his own enemies, a prince handing swords to men who were already sharpening their knives behind his back. You didn't set boundaries because you were afraid. Not afraid of conflict, afraid of being seen as cold. And that fear, that desperate need to be perceived as warm, as available, as safe for everyone, that is the leash they put around your throat without you even noticing. Dark psychology teaches one brutal truth that most people spend their entire lives running from. There are those who drain, and they do not do it by accident. They are drawn to open doors the way parasites are drawn to unguarded hosts. Your availability was their invitation. Your patience was their playground. And every time you said yes when your gut screamed no, you taught them exactly how far they could push before you folded. You didn't fold because you were weak. You folded because nobody taught you that protecting yourself is not selfish. It is the first responsibility of any king who wants to keep his crown. Generosity without strategy is just slow suicide in a nice outfit. And you have been dressed for your own funeral, smiling, pouring yourself out for people who would not pour you a glass of water if you were on fire. Recognize the bleeding, name it, and then close the wound with the only medicine that works, the word no. The Court of Wolves. Now that your eyes are beginning to open, let me show you who has been sitting in your court. Because a king who cannot identify the wolves dressed in loyalty deserves every bite he receives. Machiavelli mapped the anatomy of deception centuries ago, and the predators have not changed. They have only learned to smile better. The first one is the flatterer. This is the one who tells you exactly what you want to hear, not because they believe it, but because your ego is the door they need unlocked. They praise your worst decisions. They applaud your most reckless moves. And the moment you stumble, they vanish like smoke because they were never standing with you. They were standing near you, waiting to collect whatever fell from your table. Then there is the victim, the most dangerous archetype of all, because they disguise their extraction as helplessness. They come to you broken, again and again, not seeking solutions but seeking your energy, your hours, your emotional labor. You fix nothing for them because they are not looking to be fixed. They are looking to be fed, and you are the meal they never have to hunt for. Next is the spy, the one who asks questions they have no business asking, who remembers details you wish you never shared, who gathers intelligence on your life and trades it in rooms you will never be invited into. They know your fears, your plans, your insecurities, and they hold it all like a loaded weapon they haven't decided when to fire. And finally, the comfortable parasite, the one who has been in your life so long you mistake their presence for loyalty. They contribute nothing, they challenge nothing, they simply exist in your space, consuming your momentum by proximity alone. Machiavelli warned princes about every single one of these creatures. Awareness is not paranoia. Awareness is the first weapon of a king who refuses to be devoured by his own court. Phase 2. The philosophy of cold power. Silence is a fortification. Here is a weapon that costs you nothing, requires no training, and yet terrifies every single person who encounters it. Silence. Not the silence of a man who has nothing to say. That is emptiness. I am talking about the silence of a man who has everything to say and chooses not to. There is a violence in that kind of quiet that most people will never understand, and that is exactly why it works. Machiavelli knew that the man who speaks first in a negotiation has already surrendered his position, because language is exposure, and every word you release is a piece of your interior map handed to someone who may use it to navigate your destruction. But the Stoics understood something even deeper, that silence is not just a tactic, it is a form of self-governance. When you stop explaining your decisions, something shifts in the atmosphere around you. People begin to watch more carefully. They begin to measure their own words before approaching you. They start treating you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because your silence made them uncertain. And uncertainty in the presence of a quiet man always transforms into reverence. You have been over-explaining your entire life, justifying your boundaries, narrating your healing, advertising your growth, and every time you did, you gave the audience exactly what they needed to predict your next move. A dangerous king does not announce his strategy from the balcony. He lets the results speak in a language that requires no translation. Starting now, practice the art of the closed mouth and the open eye. Let people wonder what you are thinking. Let them fill your silence with their own assumptions, their own anxiety, their own projections. You do not owe anyone a window into your mind. Your thoughts are a war room. Seal the door. A fortress with no visible entrance is a fortress that no army knows how to siege. The law of disappearing. There is something that happens when a man becomes less available, and it is not what the world teaches you to expect. They tell you that if you pull back, people will forget you. They tell you that absence creates irrelevance. But that is the advice of men who have never studied power at its root, because Machiavelli understood the opposite, that a prince who is always visible is a prince who is never feared, never wondered about, and never truly valued. Scarcity is not a marketing trick. It is one of the oldest laws of human psychology, and it governs everything from desire to respect to obsession. When you are always there, always responding, always accessible, you teach the world that your time has no price. You become a resource that requires no effort to obtain, and anything that requires no effort is eventually taken for granted and then discarded. But the moment you disappear, not with drama, not with announcements, not with a public breakdown, but quietly, strategically, with the cold precision of a man who has decided that his presence is a privilege and not a right, the entire dynamic reverses. Suddenly, they notice the empty chair. Suddenly, they feel the weight of your missing voice in rooms that used to echo with your availability. Suddenly, your name carries a different frequency because the man who was always there is now nowhere to be found. And that absence creates a psychological vacuum that nothing else can fill. Dark psychology calls this intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive pattern in human connection. You do not reward constantly. You do not vanish permanently. You appear and withdraw on your own schedule, governed by your own rhythm, answerable to no one's expectations. This is not manipulation for the sake of cruelty. This is architecture. You are designing the terms of your own existence in the minds of others, and a man who controls how he is experienced by the world is a man who has mastered something most people never even attempt. Stop being the man who is always in the room. Become the man whose arrival changes the room. Stop being the constant notification on someone's screen. Become the message they are afraid to miss. A king does not patrol his own hallways every hour. He sits in a chamber that very few are granted access to, and the distance between his throne and the outside world is not emptiness, it is strategy. Let them feel the geography of your absence. Let the distance do what your presence never could. Emotion is intelligence until it's leaked. Let me correct a lie that has been fed to strong men for generations. The lie is this, that power requires you to feel nothing, that to be dangerous, you must become hollow. That emotion is the enemy of the strategist. This is not what Machiavelli taught. This is not what the Stoics practiced, and this is not what I am telling you now. A dangerous king feels everything. He feels rage when he is betrayed. He feels grief when he loses something he built with his bare hands. He feels loneliness at the top of a mountain that nobody else had the spine to climb. The difference between him and the man who is destroyed by those same emotions is not intensity. It is containment. Emotion is data. It is raw, unprocessed intelligence about your environment, your relationships, your own unhealed fractures. When you feel anger rising in a conversation, that anger is not a malfunction. It is an alarm system telling you that a boundary has been crossed or a value has been violated. When you feel anxiety before a decision, that is not cowardice. It is your subconscious running calculations your rational mind has not yet finished processing. Emotion is one of the most sophisticated instruments you possess, but here is where men fall. They leak it. They spray it across rooms and conversations and text messages and social media posts like a broken pipe flooding every room in the palace. And the moment your emotion becomes visible to the wrong person at the wrong time, it stops being intelligence and starts becoming ammunition. Every outburst you have ever had in front of someone who did not deserve your vulnerability was a strategic briefing handed to an adversary. Every time you showed someone how deeply they could hurt you, you gave them a map to your weakest gate. Every emotional reaction you failed to govern was a page ripped from your private war journal and left on a public bench for anyone to read. The Stoics did not teach suppression. That is another lie told by people who read one quote and built a personality around it. Marcus Aurelius wrote entire journals about his inner turmoil, but he wrote them for himself, in private, where no enemy could weaponize his humanity against him. That is the practice. Feel everything, process everything, express nothing that has not been filtered through the cold lens of strategic awareness. You are allowed to break. You are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to rage at the unfairness of what you have endured, but you do it in your chamber, behind a locked door, with the crown removed and the armor set aside. And when you walk back into the world, your face reveals nothing. Your voice carries no tremor. Your eyes give no confession. The world sees a man who is unbothered, and that perception becomes its own form of protection because people do not attack what they cannot read, and they do not test what they cannot predict. Your emotions are not your weakness. Your inability to govern their display, that is your weakness. Fix that single fracture, and you become something most men will never be. Not numb, not empty, not cold for the sake of performance, but sovereign, completely, terrifyingly sovereign over your own interior kingdom. Phase 3. The weaponization. Build the wall before they deserve the door. Most men build their defenses after the invasion. They wait for the betrayal, the heartbreak, the financial devastation, the backstab from a friend they trusted with classified pieces of their soul. And only then, bleeding and bitter, do they decide it is time to set boundaries. And Machiavelli would have looked at that man and called him exactly what he is. A fool who locked the treasury after the gold was already gone. You cannot afford to be that man any longer. The dangerous king does not wait for war to build his walls. He builds them during peacetime, when the skies are clear, when the allies are smiling, when everything appears safe. Because he understands a truth that comfortable men refuse to accept. The attack always comes when you are not expecting it. The betrayal always arrives wearing the face of someone you trusted. The collapse always begins in the room you thought was most secure, so you build now, not out of paranoia, but out of precision. Before anyone earns the door to your inner world, they must pass through a series of gates that you designed, that you control, and that you can shut at any moment without explanation or apology. This is what it means to qualify people before they enter your circle. You do not give access based on time. Someone who has been in your life for 10 years does not automatically deserve your trust if those 10 years were filled with subtle disrespect, passive consumption, and emotional negligence. Time is not loyalty. Presence is not devotion, and familiarity is the most dangerous counterfeit of genuine connection because it makes you lower your guard around people who have done nothing to earn that privilege. Start evaluating every relationship in your life through one single filter. Does this person add to my kingdom or subtract from it? Not emotionally in the moment, not based on nostalgia, not based on guilt or obligation or the fear of being alone, but strategically. Coldly, honestly. Does this person challenge you to become sharper, stronger, more disciplined? Or do they quietly benefit from your energy while offering nothing but their company in return? A king does not owe anyone a seat at his table simply because they showed up. A seat at the table is a privilege distributed by the king based on demonstrated value, consistent character, and proven loyalty under pressure. Not under comfort, not during the easy seasons, but under pressure when it costs them something to stand beside you. And here is the part that most people will resist because it requires a level of emotional discipline that very few are willing to practice. You must be willing to build the wall even when there is no visible threat. You must be willing to hold people at a distance even when they appear trustworthy. Even when your loneliness begs you to let them closer, even when every instinct tells you that this one is different, because the wall is not a punishment for them. The wall is a protection for you, and a protected king is a king who survives long enough to build something that outlasts his own name. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must learn how not to be good when the situation demands it. This is one of those situations. Being cautious with your access is not cruelty. It is architecture. You are not pushing people away. You are designing the terms under which they are allowed to approach. There is an enormous difference between a man who is isolated because he fears connection and a man who is selective because he understands the cost of misplaced trust. One is hiding. The other is governing. Build the wall now. Build it high. Build it with the calm hands of a man who knows that everything he is protecting on the other side, his peace, his vision, his energy, his future, is worth more than the temporary discomfort of telling someone they have not yet earned the key. Feed no one your future. There is a mistake that ambitious men make so consistently, so predictably, that it almost seems engineered into their downfall. They talk about what they are building before the foundation has even dried. They share the blueprint while the walls are still imaginary. They announce the empire before the first brick has been laid, and in doing so, they commit what Machiavelli would have considered one of the most catastrophic strategic errors a prince can make. They reveal their intentions to a world that has not earned the right to know them, and in many cases is actively invested in seeing those intentions fail. Let me explain what happens inside the human mind when you tell someone your plans. There is a psychological phenomenon that researchers have studied extensively, and it reveals something deeply uncomfortable about human nature. When you announce a goal, when you describe your vision out loud to an audience, your brain receives a small hit of satisfaction, not from achieving the thing, but from simply being seen as the kind of person who is going to achieve it. That premature reward tricks your nervous system into believing that progress has already been made. The applause arrives before the performance, and suddenly the hunger that was supposed to drive you toward execution begins to fade, because your mind has already tasted a counterfeit version of the finish line. You told them about the business, and their excitement felt like revenue. You told them about the move, and their admiration felt like arrival. You told them about the transformation, and their encouragement felt like completion. But nothing was completed. Nothing was built. Nothing was earned. You simply leaked your future into a room full of spectators and mistook their reactions for results. But that is only half the danger. The other half is darker and far more difficult to accept. Not everyone who listens to your plans is cheering for your victory. Some of them are taking notes. Some of them are measuring your ambition against their own insecurity and quietly deciding that your success would be an indictment of their stagnation. They will never tell you this directly. They will smile. They will say they are proud of you. They will ask follow-up questions that feel like support but are actually surveillance. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, they will begin to introduce friction, a discouraging comment disguised as realism, a subtle reminder of your past failures framed as concern, a comparison to someone who tried the same thing and lost everything. This is not conspiracy. This is human nature operating exactly as Machiavelli described it. People do not want you to fail because they hate you. They want you to fail because your success threatens the story they have told themselves about why they never tried. Your vision is not a conversation topic. Your vision is classified intelligence. It is the most valuable thing you possess because it represents the distance between who you are today and who you are becoming, and that distance is sacred. It belongs to you and to the work itself, not to an audience that will judge the blueprint before the building ever rises. From this moment forward, adopt the discipline of the sealed mouth when it comes to your future. Let your moves be silent. Let your progress be invisible. Let the world discover what you have built only after it is standing so tall and so undeniable that no opinion, no sabotage, no envy can reduce it to rubble. Machiavelli advised princes to make their intentions unreadable, not because transparency is inherently wrong, but because the world punishes premature honesty and rewards completed action. Nobody argues with results. Nobody sabotages a finished building. Nobody tries to discourage a man who is already standing on the summit. They only try to stop him while he is still climbing, when the fall would be most devastating and the doubt would be easiest to plant. So stop climbing in public. Stop narrating your ascent to people who are watching from a distance they chose. Stop turning your ambition into entertainment for an audience that will clap today and forget you by next week. Feed no one your future. Starve them of your strategy. Let them watch you move in silence and wonder how a man they underestimated built something they cannot ignore. The most dangerous king in any era was never the one who announced his conquests in advance. It was the one whose enemies only discovered his power when it was already too late to respond. The art of cold forgiveness. There is a room inside you where every betrayal still lives. Every lie that was told to your face while the truth was being whispered behind your back. Every person who took your loyalty and treated it like something disposable. Every moment where you were made to feel small by someone who did not have the range to recognize your depth. That room is full, and you have been visiting it far too often, replaying the footage, rehearsing the confrontations you never had, drafting the speeches you never delivered. And every single time you walk into that room, you pay rent to people who no longer exist in your life. You hand them your focus, your present moment, your creative bandwidth, your peace. And they do not even know they are collecting. That is the real cost of a grudge. It is not the anger itself. Anger can be useful when it is fresh and directed and purposeful. The cost is the occupation, the permanent residency you grant to people who wronged you inside the most valuable real estate you own, which is your mind. Machiavelli understood that a prince who is consumed by revenge is a prince who has already been conquered from within, because the moment your enemy occupies more of your mental territory than your own future does, they have won a war you did not even realize you were still fighting. So let me introduce you to a concept that will feel contradictory at first, but will become one of the most powerful tools in your psychological arsenal: cold forgiveness. This is not the forgiveness that the world teaches you. The warm and gentle kind where you sit across from someone, hold their hands, and tell them you understand. That version of forgiveness is designed for reconciliation, for relationships that are being repaired, for situations where both parties are invested in rebuilding. Cold forgiveness has nothing to do with the other person. They are irrelevant. Cold forgiveness is an act of strategic liberation that you perform entirely for yourself, in private, with no ceremony and no audience. It sounds like this: I am releasing you, not because you deserve peace, but because I deserve my processing power back. You are being evicted, not forgiven in any way that benefits you. I am simply choosing to reallocate the energy I have been spending on your memory, towards something that actually builds my empire. This is forgiveness as eviction. This is forgiveness as resource management. This is the Stoic emperor closing a chapter, not because the story was fair, but because the next chapter demands his full attention, and he refuses to write it with a hand that is still trembling from a wound that should have healed 3 seasons ago. But here is the critical distinction that separates cold forgiveness from naivety, and you must engrave this into every decision you make going forward. You forgive, but you never delete the file. A dangerous king does not carry grudges. Grudges are heavy, emotional, and they cloud judgment. But a dangerous king carries records. He remembers exactly what someone showed him when the pressure was applied. He remembers who disappeared during the siege and who only returned when the victory was already secured. He remembers the patterns, the excuses, the micro-expressions that preceded every act of disloyalty, and he uses that data not for revenge, but for architecture, to design a future where the same wound cannot be inflicted twice, where the same type of person cannot penetrate the same gate, where the lesson extracted from the pain becomes a permanent upgrade to the security system of his kingdom. You do not forgive because you are soft. You forgive because carrying the weight of another person's failure is beneath a man who has kingdoms to build and legacies to engineer. You release them from your emotional courtroom, but you never release them from the record. The file stays, the lesson stays, the awareness stays, and the door through which they entered your life gets reinforced with something stronger than anger. It gets reinforced with information. That is cold forgiveness. It is not mercy. It is not weakness dressed in spiritual language. It is the most calculated act of self-preservation a king can perform, and it is the moment you stop being a prisoner of your own history and start being the architect of what comes next. Phase 4. The Ascension. The king who needed no witnesses. We have walked a long road together in these few minutes. I have shown you the throne you forgot you were sitting on. I have torn away the disguise you put on your own bleeding and made you look at it without flinching. I have named the wolves in your court, handed you the weapon of silence, taught you the law of disappearing, shown you how to govern the most volatile substance you carry, your own emotion. I have told you to build your walls before the enemy gives you a reason to starve the world of your plans until your results make announcements unnecessary, and to forgive with the cold precision of a man who is reclaiming his own occupied territory. And now we arrive at the final lesson, the one that holds all the others together, the one that determines whether everything you have absorbed tonight becomes permanent transformation or just another video you watched and forgot by morning. And it is this: the most dangerous king who ever lived was not the one with the largest army, the tallest walls, or the most feared reputation. It was the king who needed no witnesses to his own greatness. Let that land for a moment, because the world you are living in right now is drowning in men who perform strength for an audience. They post their discipline, they broadcast their growth, they narrate their cold detachment in captions and reels and threads, desperate for someone to look at them and confirm that they are becoming the man they claim to be. And every single time they reach for that external validation, they hand the throne to the crowd. They make the audience the judge. They make the applause the verdict. And a king whose crown only feels real when someone else is watching him wear it is not a king at all. He is an actor in a costume, terrified of the moment the curtain falls and he is left alone with the silence of his own unwitnessed life. Machiavelli wrote about princes who built their identity on the perception of others, and his verdict was devastating. They rise fast because the crowd lifts them, and they fall faster because the crowd is the most disloyal foundation any man can build upon. The crowd cheered Caesar on his way to the Senate, and the crowd watched him bleed on the floor without lifting a single hand to save him. Nothing has changed. The platforms are different. The language is modern. The mechanisms are digital, but the architecture of public approval is identical to what it was 2,000 years ago. It is given freely, withdrawn without warning, and it belongs to whoever entertains the crowd next. So, stop building on that ground. Stop measuring your transformation by how many people notice it. Stop checking whether your discipline impressed anyone. Stop waiting for the world to reflect back to you the man you are becoming, because the world is a broken mirror and it will distort your image every single time. The real coronation does not happen in public. It happens at 4 in the morning when no one is watching and you get up anyway. It happens when you keep the promise you made to yourself, even though breaking it would cost you nothing because no one else even knows the promise exists. It happens in the moments between the moments, when the phone is face down, when the notifications are off, when there is no content being created from your pain, no audience being cultivated from your struggle, no performance being extracted from your progress. That is where the king is forged. In the unglamorous, unfilmed, unreported hours where a man does what he said he would do, simply because he said it and his word to himself is the only contract that matters. Self-validation is not arrogance. It is the final and most impenetrable wall you will ever build, because once you no longer need the world to tell you who you are, the world loses every single lever it ever had over you. They cannot bribe you with praise because you are not hungry for it. They cannot punish you with criticism because your identity is not constructed from their opinions. They cannot manipulate you with approval or destabilize you with rejection because you have built your throne on the only ground that never shifts, your own private, unshakable knowledge of what you are and what you are becoming. This is where Machiavellianism meets Stoicism at its deepest root. The prince who governs himself needs no external government. The man who validates himself needs no external jury. The king who crowns himself in silence needs no ceremony, no applause, no witness, because the crown is not decorative. It is functional. It is the weight of every decision he made in the dark, every sacrifice no one saw, every time he chose the difficult path when the easy one was right there, whispering his name. You are that king, not because I told you so, not because this video made you feel powerful for 20 minutes, but because somewhere underneath all the noise and the damage and the years of misplaced trust, you already knew it. You just needed someone to say it out loud, so the part of you that has been waiting for permission could finally stop waiting and start ruling. Now I want you to do something. Scroll down to the comments and write a single phrase: I rule in silence. That is your signature. That is your declaration that tonight, something shifted in you that is never shifting back. Write it and mean it, because the man who writes it and means it is the man who will still be living by these words 6 months from now, when the algorithm has moved on and the motivation has faded, and all that remains is the cold, quiet, unbreakable discipline of a king who needed no witnesses. If this video reached something inside you that most content never touches, hit that like button. Not for me, but as a bookmark for the version of yourself you are building right now. Subscribe to this channel, because what we build here is not entertainment. It is architecture for men who are done being ordinary. And turn on that notification bell, because the next time we meet here, we are going even deeper, and you do not want to be the man who arrives late to his own evolution. Remember, the world will adjust to the version of you that you refuse to compromise. Protect your energy, govern your silence, rule your kingdom, and never, ever apologize for the walls that kept you alive long enough to become the man that no one saw coming.